listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. The federal government has announced new vaping laws just days before a program limiting the supply of vapes was due to begin. Federal Health Minister Mark Butler said the new amendments will return vapes to their original purpose, that is, as an aid to quit smoking. To secure the support of the Greens in the Senate, Labor has agreed to backtrack on its prescription-only model. It means vapes will be made available at pharmacies across the country, but they will be regulated and subject to plain packaging requirements, with flavours limited to mint, menthol or tobacco. And the Greens are the ones who negotiated the last-minute changes.
Prohibition doesn't work. The idea of politicians saying to adults, you can't take or use this particular drug hasn't turned out that well historically. People always find a way.
Our chat with Greens leader Adam Bandt coming up in the second half of The Briefing. First though, Antoinette Lattouf is here with the headlines. It is Wednesday, June 26.
Hey Sasha, g'day everyone. Well, we begin with an enormous 14-year journey which appears to be coming to a close. Julian Assange will face court at 9 a.m. today on a US island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and this is his final bid for freedom.
Regardless of the views that people have about Mr Assange's activities, the case has dragged on for too long.
That was Anthony Albanese speaking in Parliament yesterday afternoon. The WikiLeaks founder left Bangkok in the early hours of this morning to fly to Saipan of the Mariana Islands, and this is part of the US Commonwealth. Once there, he'll plead guilty to one count of conspiring to unlawfully obtain and disseminate classified national defence information, and this is part of a plea deal.
So this appears to be, like you said, Antoinette, the end of a saga that goes back 14 years. It all started in 2010. Here's a quick recap of the situation to get us all up to speed. Assange is the founder of WikiLeaks, which is a whistleblower website renowned for exposing sensitive information. He published a trench of material detailing alleged war crimes committed by US armed forces during incursions in Iraq and Afghanistan.
So Assange won't have to serve the sentence of 62 months because he's already spent 5 years behind bars at Belmarsh Prison in the UK. And there's even talk that he could be back in Australia as soon as tonight. We spoke to filmmaker and Assange campaigner Kim Statton yesterday. It's in the feed now if you want to have a listen.
Yeah, and there's more to say about Assange, but Antoinette, you're at the centre of your own public media legal battle, and you were in the federal court yesterday for mediation with the ABC. How did it go?
Oh, look, disappointingly, we didn't reach a settlement, and that's after I was sacked for sharing a Human Rights Watch post about Israel using starvation as a tool of war. It's the same info, the exact same info the ABC reported on twice. So we didn't reach a conclusion yesterday.
What happens next?
Next up, a federal court trial will be set and it'll play out there.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. The case with Julian Assange, it's been celebrated. We've seen his supporters come out ecstatic at this news, like you said, to end this huge, long, drawn-out process. We did hear, though, from one of his detractors, former Vice President Mike Pence, who tweeted his displeasure at the idea of this plea deal being struck with the US. He said on X, Julian Assange endangered the lives of our troops in a time of war and should have been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He then went on to criticise the Biden administration's plea deal and going there. So contentious. We do know Stella Assange is in Sydney with her and Assange's kids. Could be a clue as to where he lands later today. We'll see if he does touch down in Sydney. But yeah, it's all being kept fairly hush-hush. There is talk he could also potentially front a press conference after he faces court, which is due to happen at 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time today. For the first time since 1986, a Labor senator has crossed the floor to vote against their party. Fatima Payman joined the Greens motion to recognise the state of Palestine yesterday in Parliament, alongside independent senators David Pocock and Lydia Thorpe. Labor and the coalition both tried to amend that motion. Neither party supported the other's attempts and they both failed.
And now this is a really big deal because Labor Party rules state that all members must vote in line with the position taken by the Labor caucus. So now Senator Payman risks expulsion from the Labor Party. So the caucus will decide on the penalty, and that as I mentioned, can include suspension from the caucus. And Senator Payman, you may recall, is the youngest parliamentarian. She's also the first politician to be elected who wears a hijab. She said on Tuesday evening, I was not elected as a token representative of diversity. And there she is talking about the fact that she has different views and she believes that's part of what she brings to Australian Parliament. Former NRL player Jarryd Hayne won't be facing a fourth trial over the alleged sexual assault of a woman in 2018. The New South Wales Department of Public Prosecutions has decided not to pursue another case against Hayne, whose conviction was quashed earlier this month on appeal, and he was released from prison. He had been serving a 4-year sentence.
Yeah, so he was sentenced, Antoinette, in May last year. So he'd served just over a year of this 4-year and 9-month sentence. And over the course of 3 trials, the 36-year-old was found guilty twice. In 2022, his conviction was also quashed on appeal. The first trial in 2020 resulted in a hung jury. The New South Wales DPP said it carefully considered many competing factors to determine its decision, and that included public interest in the case. And we did learn this week the federal government had watered down its vaping laws after doing a deal with the Greens. It is a contentious topic. I'm a vapor, Antoinette. I have my own feelings about the regulations that are being brought in, but what we wanted to do was open it up to our listeners and find out how they're feeling about what's going on. We did pop a question in our broadcast channel on Instagram. It's called Behind the Briefing. Here are some of the answers we got back.
Yeah, at Yield for Genesis asked, aren't chemists busy enough? I think that's a legitimate question. At Han_Liz said, it made no sense to ban vapes but not cigarettes. Also, incredibly important point. While at Alex.Andra23 told us the model is all wrong and community health initiatives are the answer rather than laws. Absolutely. All the evidence suggests that community health, not prohibition, is the best way. Harm minimisation gets the best results. And at Chrissy Betty Photos said they've seen an uptick in ciggy smokers already.
Thank you so much to everyone who did share their thoughts with us. We love to hear from you. And remember, our DMs are always open. You can get in touch on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. Look, speaking of vaping, that is our deep dive today. Antoinette, thank you for joining us for the headlines. Next up is my chat with Greens leader Adam Bandt. The Albanese government surprised everyone this week by bringing in sweeping changes to Australia's vaping laws. Vapes will only be available at pharmacies, but now you won't need a prescription for them. But they will be regulated and subject to plain packaging requirements, with flavours limited to mint, menthol or tobacco. To earn the support of the Greens in the Senate, Labor agreed to backtrack on its prescription-only model that was due to come into effect on Monday. Individuals will be required to provide a form of ID to purchase vapes, while restrictions will also limit nicotine concentration. Children under the age of 18 will still be able to purchase vapes, but will require a doctor's script to do so. Greens leader Adam Bandt led the campaign to secure the changes, and he joins me now. Adam, thanks for being here with us on The Briefing. Look, the original plan from Labor was meant to be this tough crackdown on vaping in Australia. It included a complete ban on non-prescription vapes. Why have the Greens made a deal with the government for this watered-down approach?
Look, we had 2 major concerns motivating us. One is that prohibition doesn't work. The idea of politicians saying to adults, you can't take or use this particular drug hasn't turned out that well historically. People always find a way. So we wanted to make sure we didn't end up with a prohibition model, especially if that resulted in people getting to the justice system, facing offences and crimes and so on. That's not the way to tackle this health issue. The second thing that motivated us is that we do think there is a serious public health problem here, especially amongst kids. And we've seen the take-up in kids of products vapes directly marketed at them with flavours and colours that are designed to be attractive. And we've seen a worrying uptick in children then even moving on from vapes to smoking as well. So we wanted to make sure that any response to the surge in vapes amongst young children address both of those things. And we've ended up with a model that we think strikes that balance and strikes it well.
Look, we've heard from some public health experts today who have said they do not support this deal. How was this approach informed by the Greens? What data, what information did you go off?
We took a lot of advice including from public health experts, because countries around the world are grappling with this for the first time, and people are trying it in different ways. And in other countries, they've had an approach that hasn't worked. They've still got children vaping in significant numbers. We wanted to come up with an approach here that says if you're under 18, then and you're currently hooked and you want vapes, you're going to need to go to the doctor, continue to need to go to the doctor, but you won't get fined if you're caught with a vape. We're going to treat it as a health issue. If you're over 18, then you now have access to vapes without the flavouring, so it'll be a bit like cigarettes. It'll be regulated in the same way. You'll have to go into the pharmacist to get them. So I think from the health experts that we spoke to, and a wide range of them, one of the things that really stood out for us was that there's been a really nefarious marketing strategy towards kids to push unicorn and bubblegum flavours on them and to make them look really attractive and taste attractive. And under our model, that won't be possible anymore.
We've heard from the Pharmacists Guild today, and they said the subject of their press release was not tobacconists, not garbologists, I suppose in response to the idea that they might as well be responsible for some sort of disposal process. How much consultation was done with pharmacists on this policy?
The government has been engaging with a range of stakeholders, and of course pharmacists were going to have a role in the government's original scheme. They were going to have to fill prescriptions for people who came in with vapes. Now, so they're still going to have to do what was done originally. It's just a prescription won't be needed. And so it doesn't really change in a fundamental way the role of pharmacists in the scheme. One of the things that we felt concerned about was that requiring people, adults, to have to go to a GP, especially with the cost of living crisis that we've got at the moment, a lot of people just wouldn't do it or wouldn't be able to afford to do it, and that then would encourage a growth in the black market. And so this will require them to come back into the pharmacist and have that interaction. But that was going to be part of the government's model anyway. You would have had to have got it via a prescription via the pharmacist.
One of your concerns that you mentioned before was around the criminalisation of carrying vapes, of people, ending up in the justice system. Look, I'm a vapor. I've never had that fear. I know a few vapors who have never had that fear. Have you got examples of this happening where regular citizens are being stopped by police because they've got a vape in their hand? Like, why was that such an important part of this policy?
Well, we are hearing reports of that happening at a state level, and the government's original scheme, we were concerned, was going to move towards exactly that kind of prohibition model where it would have said this is now against the law. And we're clear that that's not something we wanted to support. We didn't want to see a change in the law that could end up with some of the reports that we're hearing at the moment about people being stopped and being used against marginalised communities. We didn't want that to become the norm because that was the government's response. So we were very, very clear that we wanted a special carve-out in this bill from the way that the government's going to tackle vapes. We wanted to say, okay, yes, there will be certain things that will be offences if you've got vapes in a big enough quantity that you can be deemed to be a supplier, and we're talking dozens and dozens and dozens all at the one time, then okay, then you're basically acting like a shop if you're in that situation in a retail setting. But we wanted an explicit carve-out and a change to the original drafting to say that individual users aren't the target, right? And individual users shouldn't have to be worried that under this new model they could somehow find themselves committing an offence, because that's not how you tackle problems like this. And so now, as a result of this, it'll be clear that you could be walking down the street using a vape. It doesn't matter how you've got it, and that won't be a criminal offence. The only things that change under this law are, I guess, those at the big supplier end.
I'm curious to know how you think this change in policy will help address the black market. Now, the fear was you ban them all. Well, of course, a black market is going to flourish in that environment. To be fair, this version where people don't have a choice in flavours, they have to go to a pharmacy, they have to, say to someone, oh, please, and deal with the idea of someone saying, well, have you tried nicotine patches or a spray or whatever? Is it not a concern that the black market will continue under this model anyway because it is still so restrictive?
Look, I guess you get that with all drugs, don't you? You have that question about whether or not they can be got via other ways. Our concern has been to avoid a prohibition model that drives a big black market, but at the same time understanding that there is a real, and I think adults are in a different position to children here, that there has been a worrying increase amongst kids because we know that the vape companies, many of whom are associated with the tobacco companies, have been marketing directly at kids. And so for us, it's about how do you strike that balance? And I think with every drug, there's always that question about how do you tackle the black market. And one of the things that's built into this is that in 3 years' time, it's going to be reviewed and we'll see whether we've got it right or not. And but other countries around the world, like everyone is dealing with this for the first time. And the health evidence, especially for children, was pretty clear and pretty persuasive to us that there's a growing problem that's disrupting schools and kids at a very early age getting addicted to nicotine and a worrying uptick in the rates of smoking amongst children. So they're the things that we wanted to balance. Like how do you ensure that you're looking after children's health, but at the same time respecting individual adults' liberties and not treating them as criminals.
Labor negotiated on this policy with the Greens to secure your support in the Senate. What have the Greens gotten out of it?
Well, again, we've got protections for people, with significant protections to ensure that despite the changes to the laws, that there won't be individuals who vape can't be prosecuted. It's not going to be a criminal offence under this new regime. And your personal possession of it and personal use of that is going to be protected. And I think that is a very, very significant thing, that a change to the approach that the government was wanting to adopt. And we're moving away from a prohibition model, which we know history just tells us is fails, and instead into one where we're going to treat it as a health question. And I think if we could start to think about other drugs in that move as well. We've got Victoria now moving towards saying that they're going to have pill testing. I think the more that we can start to think about these as health questions rather than as criminal questions, the better off we're going to be as society.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I think caught a few people by surprise when the news was announced. Thanks so much for explaining it to us. Look, before we let you go, we did hear the news yesterday afternoon or late yesterday morning about Julian Assange's securing his release from a British prison. He's due to head back down under within days, according to reports. What's your response to that news?
Look, we're still obviously just seeing those reports coming out, and obviously there's still some things to be confirmed, but Julian Assange has been incarcerated for far too long. This has gone on for far too long, and just as a basic principle, journalism shouldn't be a crime. We've been pushing very, very hard for many years for Julian Assange to be brought home, because I think whatever side you line up on about whether you agree with what he did or not, I think being held in the way that he has, to the point that it's massively impacted his mental health and people were worried about his life, was just wrong. And so, again, let's wait and watch and see what's actually going to happen. But we've been pushing for a very long time for Julian Assange to be brought home, and if it happens, it's very good news.
Adam Bandt, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to today's briefing. That is all for now. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might enjoy it. And don't forget, we put out full episodes of our Weekend Briefing chats on YouTube, and we'd love it if you could show them some love. Search Listener Newsroom and don't forget to subscribe. I'm Sasha Barbagat. See you this afternoon for another episode of The Briefing.
Listener.